Hello and welcome to Monster of the Week, the only show on the internet that thinks if you don't have anything nice to say, you should just mutter some incoherent language of the gods and force your enemies to wither and die. Today, we're talking about an undead creature who does exactly that. The PAINSPEAKER is a horrific monster that has undergone a treatment I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, and I'm very excited to tell you all about it. Today we're going over its publication history, lore, and ecology within Dungeons & Dragons. Then we're going to talk about some plot hooks and story ideas for how you might actually use the thing, and of course convert it into 5th edition. To all the players watching who might have to face off against this creature in the future as a result of this video, I'm very sorry. And to all the DMs watching, you're welcome. Now, you better watch your language, because it's time to learn everything there is to know about the only undead creature that talks you to death. The PAINSPEAKER first came to us in the Tome of Magic, a book printed in 2006 towards the end of D&D 3.5's life cycle. I've talked about this book on the channel before, but if you're new here, basically this product was meant to expand on the existing magic system as it was in the days of 3rd edition D&D. It introduced Shadow, Truename, and Pact magic as 3 new schools of magic that one could draw from. That's right, nerds were out here making pacts with eldritch beings long before the days of 5th edition. But I digress. A big section of this book, as was typical practice at the time, was all about bringing some new monsters into the game. These would be creatures that fit into the aforementioned categories of magic to serve as examples of creatures that might use these new weird ways to cast spells. And if the name wasn't already an Undead giveaway, the PAINSPEAKER fits into the category of monsters that use Truename Magic. For the uninitiated, Truename Magic is basically a school of magic that uses the universal truth of language to affect reality. A good example of this most players and DMs alike are aware of is the spell Power Word Kill. This spell works because you're channeling Truename Magic to essentially command someone to die.
Why don't you just die?
And while this is definitely an extreme example, it does a great job of illustrating how this works. Theoretically, there is a word of power or a sentence constructed using words of power that could achieve literally anything. For example, if I know the true name of French fries, simply by uttering it, I can make them appear in my hand. But this language is also extremely complex. And if you're not prepared in body, spirit, and mind to actually channel this magic as you speak the words, the backlash could literally kill you. Wait, what? In stark contrast to the Word Archon, a creature I talked about last year that is all about protecting the sanctity of Truename Magic, the PAINSPEAKER is all about defiling truth and using this magic as a way to spread fear and destruction. Physiologically speaking, the PAINSPEAKER is a medium-sized humanoid undead. They have sickly greenish skin that appears to be both rotten and dehydrated, giving the PAINSPEAKER an almost skeletal appearance. Though what might first appear as a zombie or business casual skeleton is actually something much more nefarious. As always, when it comes to undead monsters, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, why does this creature exist? After all, undead are inherently against the natural order, meaning that any undead creature which walks the earth must have been created by someone or something. Usually, it's either a being with necromantic powers like a necromancer, or it's a cosmic force of will, often affecting those who died in a very specific way. In the case of the PAINSPEAKER, it's the latter. Every PAINSPEAKER was once a living person who failed to speak about something incredibly important to them before they were killed. This can mean a lot of different things. The PAINSPEAKER may have been a messenger who failed to deliver an important message before they died. Or perhaps they were a lover that never took the chance to confess their feelings for someone. Or maybe they were a craftsman that was never afforded the chance to pass on their art to the next generation. Whatever the case and actual reasoning behind it, the PAINSPEAKER is always the result of a being that died before being able to say something that was incredibly important to them personally. Something so important that it's caused their spirit to rise from the grave. Now, the first thing that's likely to throw anyone off that comes across a PAINSPEAKER is the fact that unlike most undead, they can talk. And by talk, I mean they can mutter words in an ancient long-forgotten language as they drag their desiccated corpse across the earth. What the actual words muttered by these creatures are is ultimately up to the DM, but personally I'm of the mind that it's nothing good. Surely they didn't rise from the grave to ask how the weather is. I like to imagine that the words they stammer through are some version of whatever it was they left unsaid before they died. But that's just my f***ed up brain talking. Let's move on and take a look at how these uttered words of power might actually affect other creatures who hear them and explore a little. The PAINSPEAKER clocks in with a challenge rating of 4, which puts it in a very versatile place. A singular PAINSPEAKER can be a big problem for a group of baby adventurers, and a swarm of them can be a big problem for even the most seasoned heroes. On account of the fact that the creatures do indeed have arms, they of course have a slam attack. This attack is ultimately pretty inoffensive and barely worth noting. Like, color me shocked, the zombie has a slam attack. It can punch you in the face for a little bit of damage. But basic melee attacks are not why we're here today. We're here to talk about the forbidden words. Every word of power in the language of creation also has an inverse of its pronunciation and meaning. So that incantation that creates french fries in my hand, if spoken negatively, would destroy any french fries present. The words uttered by a PAINSPEAKER are the inverse of the words for healing and life. This is colloquially referred to as the word for pain, but it's a lot more accurate to say that it's speaking the words for unlife or necrosis. So as you can imagine, anyone who hears these words is subject to the utterance of pain action performed by the PAINSPEAKER. This causes all creatures within 30 feet of it to take 6d6 necrotic damage, or half as much on a successful charisma saving throw. So essentially the PAINSPEAKER is going to be using these utterances to try and harm any creatures it comes across, while it throws a few punches in between rounds while the utterance of pain ability recharges. Overall, it's a pretty simple but very effective monster. When I read about this initially, this all seemed very cool to me. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be making a video about this creature if I thought it was stupid. I like the core concept of this creature, and its relatively simple stat block is just laser focused on what it wants to do, and I appreciate that in a monster. But I couldn't help but feel like there was a little something missing, so I got to tinkering a bit. And the one thing I couldn't help myself but thinking about while I was working on this creature was how it might interact with a very specific spell. Speak with Dead is a staple D&D spell that many parties have used to mixed results since it was put to paper. Basically, the spell allows you to ask a corpse 5 questions.
Once the dead man is revived, we can ask him 5 questions, at which point he will die again, never to be re-revived.
There are no guarantees about the truthfulness of the answer, and the target can't be undead. It has to be just a corpse. I felt like there was some room for a unique interaction here. The entire conceit of the PAINSPEAKER is that it is a cursed undead entity that is forced to walk the earth for eternity, never being able to actually articulate those words they left unsaid. So what if we included a trait that allowed for a special circumstance? I mean, I guess I don't need to ask what if, because I did that. If you cast Speak with Dead on my version of the PAINSPEAKER, the creature will make a saving throw based on the caster's spell save DC. If the PAINSPEAKER fails the save, it is allowed to speak whatever words it was unable to in life. It can pass on that hidden knowledge, deliver its message, or say the incredible knock-knock joke it never had a chance to tell. This, of course, will allow the PAINSPEAKER's spirit to find peace, and the creature will be destroyed instantly. If you hate this idea, you can completely ignore this trait and just use the creature as it was originally written. But I felt like this was a really neat way to reward some creative thinking on the player's part. Plus, I think it might lead to some really cool roleplay moments, depending on what the PAINSPEAKER has to say. But that's getting into story stuff, so let's take a break from mechanics and talk about how we might actually use the PAINSPEAKER in the stories we tell.
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Yeah.
When you make use of a PAINSPEAKER, I think the first thing you need to consider is why. I mean, obviously you should always think about why you're using one monster over another when you're telling a story, but the PAINSPEAKER has this attached baggage of its former life on full display. It's not merely a mindless corpse raised to fight on behalf of a necromancer. The PAINSPEAKER has some unfinished business, and I think it's important to consider what that business might be. A creature like this can be very good at setting the tone of a location. An example given in the source material that I think illustrates this point perfectly is the book's take on how a PAINSPEAKER might appear in the world of Eberron. In Eberron, there is a catastrophic event known as the Day of Mourning. This event was nothing short of a magically enacted genocide that entirely destroyed a country and killed every living thing within its borders. As a result, you can only imagine how cursed that place has become. Just bad vibes all around in the Mournland. But one creature you're very likely to meet there is a PAINSPEAKER. If you can imagine an entire population being destroyed overnight, think of all the important things left unsaid. PAINSPEAKERs would be all too common in a location like this. Encountering these creatures so frequently in an area might tell a story of a great tragedy. If you're actually playing in Eberron right now, that one's for free. But even outside of Eberron, using a population of PAINSPEAKERs localized in a specific geographic region can be a great way of showcasing the place's history. I also think the PAINSPEAKER is a fantastic candidate for a Monster of the Week style game.
He said it! He said it!
The other example given by the book is a perfect illustration of what I mean.
About a century ago, Ankandara, a beautiful sun elf cleric, officiated over the Temple of Suni in Waterdeep. Many of the congregation attended services with the dual purpose of honoring the goddess and appreciating the grace and beauty of her cleric. One such parishioner was a shy ranger named Edwin the Silent. Edwin spent much of his time in the wild, but would often return to the city. Month after month, he tried to work up the courage to declare his devotion to Ankandara, but failed. During the last rage of dragons, he died when his copper dragon ally went berserk. Edwin's deep, undeclared love caused him to return as a PAINSPEAKER. The dragon-mauled corpse fought its way to the Temple of Suni, killing several people who tried to stop it. It rampaged until the commotion drew Ankandara's attention. Upon seeing her, it whispered, "Ankandara, in truth it was you I came here to worship, not Suni," and then crumbled to dust.
Now, was Erdwin being a little bit much here? Definitely, but the impact of the story still remains. It paints a clear picture of this undead entity trying to achieve something it failed to do while alive, and thematically, that's really interesting to me. This isn't exactly an original concept when it comes to the undead at large as they exist in pop culture, but there's a reason that it's been so pervasive for such a long time. As far as translating this into an adventure, perhaps the party is trying to help the PAINSPEAKER find peace so that its soul can finally pass on. You could even bend the rules a little bit and make it sort of like a revenant. When its body is destroyed, perhaps it simply rises again a few days later and is destined to do so again and again and again until it can say whatever it needs to say to whoever it needs to talk to. Or maybe the party has actually killed someone in order to prevent them from saying something. Maybe they're trying to silence a messenger. Even if their objective was just and good, for lack of a better term, that doesn't mean the creature they killed won't still rise as a PAINSPEAKER if the thing they were unable to say was important to them. No one ever said that the PAINSPEAKER's unsaid words had to be good or positive even. Perhaps the party encounters a PAINSPEAKER who became what they are because they never had a proper chance to deliver a message to the evil overlord about the location of the rebel base. As I said, I think thematically this monster's so interesting, and there's a lot of room to play with those themes beyond just what the creature's stat block has to offer. I really like the idea of a bard being brought back as a PAINSPEAKER, someone who was unable to tell their epic tale to what they saw as enough people, and maybe that's your villain of the campaign. this cursed undead bard who is going from town to town telling this tale, but because of their corrupted nature, it's just killing everybody or turning them into zombies or something. YouTube shows me the analytics. I know a bunch of you guys also watch Pointy Hat, and for any of you who have seen his video about the undead lich bard, I think that the PAINSPEAKER could make for a really good minion to work on behalf of that creature. Maybe you just have a bunch of PAINSPEAKERs who are kind of acting as emissaries of this undead overlord, whether you go with the bard thing or not, and they're kind of spreading the message of this evil entity, this evil creature who is gonna roll in with his armies, but the PAINSPEAKERs are kind of the first wave of that to soften everybody up and make some new servants. Because, you know, every living person is just a future corpse, which means they're a future soldier in the army of the undead. There really are endless possibilities here. But the bottom line is this. Consider what the PAINSPEAKER has left unsaid, consider who they want to say that thing to, and consider how they died and what caused them to be unable to say their piece in the first place. I'm always excited to see what ideas you guys come up with in the comments section, but this week I'm especially intrigued. This monster is just so thematically compelling to me, so I'm definitely going to be reading what's in there, and I look forward to it. I also want to take a moment to give a shout out to all of the patrons who support this show and literally make it possible, and give a special shout out to our Patron of the Week. This week's randomly selected patron is none other than Anime Accord. I hope you've seen my videos about the Spirit Warrior and the Bionoid, because they sound right up your alley. But thank you so much for your support, and thank you for watching. As always, if you do want to use this monster, linked in the description down below, there is a Google document which has all of the stats and information you will need to run a PAINSPEAKER successfully at your game table. And if you are one of my aforementioned patrons, over on the Patreon page, you will find the Dungeon Dad style high-res PDF stat block, which has all the same information as what's in the Google document. It's just a bit of a nicer presentation, gives you something to stick in your DM folder, and helps support the show. Also, in terms of places you can find more Dungeon Dad content, in the description down below, there's also a link to the Dungeon Dad Discord, where we have monthly monster creation contests and just a really solid community kind of centered around monsters specifically, but kind of DMing at large as well. Also, I post memes there. They're very funny. Also, as a special ending note here, I want to give a special shout out to the Vineyard RPG Kickstarter. A lot of you watching this may already know this about me, or maybe you don't, I don't know. It's not something I like push on my channel very often, but I do music composition as kind of a side thing. So I often take on contracts to do like cinematic music for tabletop games, a lot of like actual play stuff or YouTube videos, that kind of thing. And I have been contracted by the Vineyard RPG Kickstarter to do music for them. Basically, the Vineyard RPG is a whole collection of villains and like a massively fleshed out network of villains that you can use for your game, or you can like run the campaign as it's written. But that is on Kickstarter right now, and I am doing music for them. I'm going to be doing a villainous track for every one of the villains. They're going to have their own theme song and of course some combat music as well. So every villain's going to have 2 tracks. And yeah, I'll leave a link to both that and my second channel where I do music stuff in the pinned comment on this video. So if you want to check out the Vineyard RPG, here's some of my music I've done for it. You can find that down there. This isn't like a paid sponsorship or anything. This is just a cool project being worked on by some cool people that I'm like tangentially involved with and wanted to give them a little bit of a spotlight. So check it out. In any case, thank you so much for watching. Next week's episode is going to be a huge one. The preview's coming up after the credits, and I will see you then.
Dungeon Dad heads out to a mysterious new locale. Everything might seem completely normal at first, but where are all the animals? Is it possible that this entire valley is just one massive creature? Next episode, Genius Loci. Tune in next time for lots more fan service.